Hey everyone, welcome back to Brain Boogers. I'm MJ, and today we're diving into something that shapes our self-perception, our relationships, and even the way we move through the world: cognitive biases, specifically the Dunning-Kruger effect and some of its closest cousins. If you've ever found yourself totally confident about something, only to realize you might have been way off, you're not alone. Let's talk about why our brains do this, how it shows up in society, and what we can do to get a little wiser. If you haven't, please click the subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you never miss the latest. Share this episode with someone who could use a little inspiration. Your experiences help us all move forward together. Before we begin, please note, the content shared on this podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only and is based on research, personal experiences as a coach, and anecdotes from my wellness journey. I am not a psychiatrist, psychologist, psychoanalyst, therapist, or licensed mental health professional. This podcast does not offer medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you are experiencing mental health issues or have inquiries concerning your well-being, it is advised to seek assistance from a qualified healthcare provider or mental health professional. So what is the Dunning-Kruger effect? The Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias where people with low ability at a task overestimate their ability, while practitioners tend to underestimate themselves. It was first described by psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger in 1999. This wasn't that long ago, we were supposed to be on the brink of flying cars then. What inspired the study of this bias was the lemon juice robbery of 1995. You see, back then being a spy and engaging in espionage was all the rage. It had been on a high as a cultural totem supported by various franchises with drugs, sex, and expensive toys. Also, some of you may remember seeing spy shops where you could find the latest spyware, not the computer virus. Or for kids, some fast food chains marketed kids clubs with characters also donning sophisticated, hyperbolic, and expensive gadgets similar to spyware. Again, not the computer virus. As a kid, I had a compass watch, a black light and invisible ink, and a long-range microphone. And often presented in entertainment was the use of lemon juice for invisible ink. Now, on a winter day in January of 1995, two individuals, MacArthur Wheeler and Clifton Earl Johnson, chose to rob two banks at gunpoint without disguising themselves. You see, Wheeler was under the impression that the lemon juice he had applied to his face would make him invisible to cameras, even after attempting to test his assumption. Fun fact, it didn't work. But this isn't just about intelligence or crime gone wrong. The Dunning-Kruger effect can show up anywhere, at work, in relationships, even in our own self-care routines. As someone once said, we know enough to think we're right, and not enough to know we're wrong. While on a journey of self, I came across this bias as I dug into logic, biases, and fallacies. Funny enough, this was also around the time I started noticing many people had a strong opinion about things they knew very little about. I experienced this with myself when I realized that even with my years of ministry, preaching, and teaching, I knew very little about religion, spiritual teachings, and traditions, the psychology of man and his symbols, and psychology and philosophy in religion. As I tumbled through Descartes, Jung, Heidegger, Maslow, Ram, May, and Hegel, to name a few, I started hearing terms that my pastors had thrown around in sermons, and they'd presented them as if they had gotten a new revelation from on high using Greek and Latin and wowing the churchgoers with their mighty words. I realized many of these spiritual leaders were talking over the heads of their members, and that I'd been one of those members who'd gone along with the show. And in that, I was parroting what I'd heard without knowing what I was saying. And while engaging in discussion with family about religion, I had to say, I don't know, when I thought the answer I had was an easy one. I was realizing there was much more I needed to learn before I offered another opinion. I know you can think of a time when someone committed to this bias, and you either caught it and corrected it, or didn't catch it and went along with it. Remember, no judgment, just forward motion and progress. You see it now, and yay! This is an example of not doing due diligence, not doing research. So when I did, boy oh boy, I gotta say, things sound different when you read things for yourself. The joke on South Park, damn it, why won't it read, has a bit more weight now. Also, I get that sometimes we're repeating something that we heard someone else say. Someone we gave enough credibility to repeat what they'd said without checking our biases and conjectures with research and refutations. An example of this is, and some of my friends listening can witness, if you tell me something, I'm likely on my smartphone looking up what you're talking about instead of resting solely on your explanation. I mean, that's what smartphones are for, right? To make you smart? Sorry. Anyway, I want to know if what is being said is truth, or if someone assumes I'll be gullible to blindly trust them. Like when a famous artist who named their child a cardinal direction had a moment where the mental spigot was opened and they had the attention of everyone perched on the highest platform in the country. They mentioned how slavery was still legal, and this was followed by cries of anger from various corners of the media. After watching a network news channel talk about how this display of word salad by the individual talking about the slave mentality and how slavery was still legal in the US amounted to a circus, and hearing others around me agree that it was a mockery, I wanted to hear it for myself. When I did, I learned that slavery is still legal in the US. Check the 13th Amendment for yourself. While the media focused on the person, I tried to listen to what was said. I mean, even in moments of hyperbole, there's a crumb of truth, just maybe not in the right context. So today, I want to talk about when we think we're right and don't know we're wrong, and how to improve our responses and reactions to everyday conversations and avoid socially patterned defect. If ever you've said the following, or it was said to you, they've got more confidence than competence, not the sharpest tool in the shed, but you can't tell them that. All had no cattle, all talk no action. Or, they're playing expert with a fake it till you make it routine, a little heavy on the fake. Or, boldly going where they shouldn't, writing checks their skills can't cash because they're a legend in their own mind. Then let's talk about biases. Alright, so before we jump in, let's zoom out for a second and look at a few other biases that often travel with Dunning-Kruger. So there's the fundamental attribution error, which is when we judge others harshly for their mistakes, like they're careless, but excuse our own. I was just tired. The weird thing about this is it was the flip for me. I was graceful with others while being my own dungeon master. Think of a time when this might have been the case for you. And now that you're aware of it, you can manage it. Or the illusory superiority bias. This is when most people think they're above average at things like driving, leadership, or even self-awareness. Like when someone is too confident for their own good or out of their depth and in over their head. There's also the imposter syndrome, which is the flip side of the illusory superiority, where highly competent people doubt their abilities and fear being exposed as a fraud. There's the confirmation bias or selective exposure, and this is when we tend to seek out information that confirms what we already believe, ignoring evidence to the contrary. Keyword, believe. You might have said, they don't know what they don't know, or a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Similar to this is the echo chamber effect, where we surround ourselves with information and opinions that reinforce existing views, often used in the context of social media or groupthink. While we want to hear what we think we know, if we stay in that level of understanding, we develop an exponentially expanding blind spot. Motivational speaker and author Dennis Waitley is quoted as saying, "Never become so much of an expert that you stop gaining expertise. View life as a continuous learning experience." There's the congruence bias, and this is the inclination to test one's own hypothesis exclusively rather than considering alternatives. There's the belief perseverance, and that's when we're holding on to initial beliefs even after they have been discredited. There's also the self-serving bias, when we take credit for our successes but blame external factors for our failures, like a complicated battle of appearing like you're acting through internal locus of control while operating based on the external manipulators and influences. Now, we can see how these biases show up in society, such as through social media where people confidently share weak information as facts or strong, unchallenged opinions with little knowledge or based on shallow research. Or in the workplace where there's overconfident leaders who may overlook the input of others while talented folks may not speak up enough. There's also in the news where we have hot takes, misinformation, and echo chambers that thrive when we're not aware of our biases. And in mental health, sometimes we either overestimate our resilience or underestimate our need for support. Someone may be saying, I'm not biased. Well, it depends on how you look at it. Everyone has a bias towards something. These biases show up in our day-to-day relationships. Ever been in an argument where both people are absolutely sure they're right? That's bias at work. Or have you ever given feedback and noticed the other person gets defensive, or vice versa? Or maybe you've underestimated your own role in a conflict, or overestimated it. Both can happen. So let's get to the basics and ask, what is a bias? A bias is a tendency or inclination to think, feel, or act in a particular way that is often unbalanced or unfair. Within the field of psychology, this term commonly denotes consistent patterns of deviation from rational judgment or decision making. Biases can show up in how we interpret information, remember events, or make choices. So is it bad? Bias isn't inherently bad. It's just a mental shortcut our brains use to process information quickly. Sometimes these shortcuts help us make fast decisions or keep us safe. But they can also lead to errors in judgment, misunderstandings, or unfair treatment of others. In this way, biases are closely related to heuristics. They're like cousins in the world of psychology and decision making. Heuristics are mental shortcuts or rules of thumb that our brains use to make quick decisions or judgments without having to analyze every detail. They're super helpful for navigating daily life, especially when we don't have time or information to make a fully rational choice. Biases are the systematic errors or tendencies that can result from relying on these heuristics. In other words, when our mental shortcuts lead us astray or cause us to consistently misjudge a situation, that's a bias. So, in summary, heuristics are the shortcuts. Biases are the potential errors that can come from using those shortcuts. They're not always bad, sometimes they're necessary, but being aware of them helps us make better, more balanced decisions. Few common heuristics and the biases they can create are: 1. Availability heuristic is used when judging the likelihood of events based on how easily examples come to mind. For example, overestimating the frequency or importance of events because they're more memorable, like thinking plane crashes are common after seeing them in the news. 2. Representativeness heuristic is used when judging something based on how much it resembles a typical case. The related bias is base rate neglect. This is ignoring statistical realities in favor of stereotypes. For example, assuming someone is a librarian because they're quiet, even though statistically, librarians are rare. 3. Anchoring heuristic is when an individual is relying too heavily on the first piece of information encountered, or the anchor, when making decisions. The related bias is anchoring bias. This is being overly influenced by initial information, like a starting price during negotiations. 4. Affect heuristic is used when making decisions based on emotions or gut feelings rather than facts. The related bias is affect bias, letting positive or negative feelings about something influence your judgment beyond what's rational. And 5. Recognition heuristic is when we prefer options we recognize over those we don't. The related bias here is familiarity bias. This is when we're choosing something simply because it's familiar, not necessarily because it's better. These shortcuts are natural and often helpful, but being aware of the biases they create can help you make more thoughtful, accurate decisions. So, do we all have a bias? Absolutely. Every human has biases. They're a natural part of how our brains work, shaped by our experiences, upbringing, culture, and even biology. You can't eliminate bias completely, but you can become more aware of them and work to minimize their negative impact. Bias gets a bad rap because it often leads to mistakes, unfairness, or discrimination, especially when we're not aware of it. For example, confirmation bias can make us ignore evidence that contradicts our beliefs, and implicit bias can affect how we treat people without realizing it. In fields like science, law, or mental health, unchecked bias can have real-world negative consequences. But remember, being aware of your biases is a sign of growth, not failure. It helps you make better decisions, treat others more fairly, and understand yourself more deeply. So now, how do we spot and work with these biases? What do we do about it? Well, we can stay curious by asking ourselves, what if I'm wrong? Or what else could be true? We can seek feedback through trusted friends, mentors, or even journaling that can help us see our blind spots. We can also practice humility. It's okay not to have all the answers. In fact, that's where growth begins. Normalize your mistakes. Share your I was wrong stories and invite others to do the same. And mindfulness. Take a pause before reacting. Notice your thoughts and feelings without judgment. So let me share a quick story. I have definitely employed the Dunning-Kruger bias a couple times in my life. Once when, as a young trainer, I recommended melatonin for muscle recovery during the day. Yeah. Or, while visiting a friend and going to brunch, I was asked to help park the car. My friend was considering the times I'd driven and had no problems, so instead of backing down, I happily tried to help. I thought my dexterity with my vehicle would transfer. It didn't, and I couldn't park the car. Or, back when I used to cut my own hair, and someone asked me to cut theirs, and it didn't turn out well. I've had enough moments in my life to abide by what the good church folks say, abiding in my calling or ministry. And cutting others' hair was not my ministry. Training is my ministry, coaching is my ministry, and that mistake taught me to make sure I know what I'm talking about. We even know a few mainstream characters who are great at the Dunning-Kruger effect, like Michael Scott in The Office. And see, Michael often overestimates his management skills and business savvy. There's Andy Dwyer from Parks and Recreation, who's lovable but clueless, often taking on tasks outside his expertise, like becoming a children's entertainer or giving legal advice, with total confidence and little actual knowledge. This is not to be confused with stretch goals. Stretch goal is a target or objective that goes beyond what you currently think is easily achievable. It's intentionally ambitious, challenging you to reach higher than your comfort zone or standard expectations. They're meant to inspire innovation, creativity, and extra effort, often meaning achieving them requires new strategies, skills, or ways of working. And even if not fully reached, striving for it often leads to greater progress than if you'd set a more conservative target. Or say Joey Tribbiani on Friends, where he believes he's a brilliant actor, despite missing cues, not understanding scripts, or failing to grasp basic concepts like when he tried to speak French. Or Homer on The Simpsons, who is notorious for thinking he's qualified for jobs he's completely unprepared for, such as being an astronaut, an inventor, and even running for mayor. His overconfidence is a running gag, often leading to hilarious disasters. Safe to watch on television, not useful in reality. And Sheldon Cooper from the Big Bang Theory, who's a genius in physics, but often assumes that expertise transfers to every other subject, leading him to make bold and incorrect claims about things like driving, social cues, or even cooking. These characters' overconfidence in their often lacking abilities is a comedic engine for these shows and a perfect illustration of the Dunning-Kruger effect in action. Great to laugh at and important to avoid. So while the Dunning-Kruger effect highlights the pitfalls of overestimating our abilities, there are several mindsets, habits, and sayings that serve as practical counters to it, reminding us to check ourselves, seek feedback, and value expertise, and providing a way to become a part-time member of the club instead of full-time. Such as 1. Read before replying. Can't tell you how many times I've had a distinct conversation with individuals who won't read, and instead reply in a matter-of-fact manner, often exposing their ignorance on a topic. Some will even get a little defensive and want to tell you a thing or two. Avoid being that person for whom another says, "Damn it, why won't it read?" Save yourself the hassle. 2. Measure twice, cut once. Double check your work before acting. Take the time to verify your knowledge or understanding. This habit encourages caution and thoroughness, reducing overconfidence and costly mistakes. No one is asking for perfection. Instead, a little more conscientiousness. 3. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. Gaining expertise often reveals just how much more there is to learn. This promotes intellectual humility and curiosity, keeping egos in check. This goes back to the earlier quote that we think we know enough to be right and don't know enough that we're wrong. Time won't let any of us learn all that is contained in the world's libraries. Maybe one day we'll be able to download and synthesize that data. It's easy to fall into the rabbit hole of being a professional student, like Professor Zhao from Avatar: The Last Airbender, whose bones were found in the library. And while we wish we could, we can't learn all the information of the universe. So start with a little bit and take it from there. Oh, and for those who say they don't have time, think about how much of your time in traffic, cleaning, or doing busy work is taken up by the same 10 songs you listen to all day, every day. Maybe try chipping away at those songs on repeat, feeding you the same energy you're trying to fight, and start learning more about something you know little about, or nothing at all. Number 4. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. We talked about Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where he prioritizes listening and understanding before asserting your own views. This aids in reducing snap judgments and overconfidence, especially in new or complex situations. 5. Check your work. We should remember this annoying phrase from math and science classes. It stands as a good practice outside of the classroom to review and critique your own output, or ask others to do so. This builds in a feedback loop to catch errors you might miss due to overconfidence. Oftentimes, it's a user issue. 6. Don't be the smartest person in the room by surrounding yourself with people who challenge and stretch your thinking. This encourages learning from others and recognizing your own limitations. Can I say, this also doesn't mean you can be the least knowledgeable person in the room and lead. You don't need to know all possible solutions, more so need to know what may be possible and have the right individuals to execute. I had to realize this a few times when I accepted roles to lead projects. I knew much about other aspects, but not the whole, and I had to learn how to depend on others for their knowledge and experience, from the classroom to the boardroom. 7. Trust but verify. Have confidence, but always back it up with evidence or a second opinion. Show the receipts. This balances self-assurance with healthy skepticism. I sometimes chuckle inwardly when a friend says, "You don't trust me?" While I want to say, "No, I don't trust you," unquestionably and blindly, and so I'm going to do what I think I can to verify what I've heard. I also know that many may take offense. My high openness to experience and moderate agreeableness made for an often gullible individual. So today, I happily ask questions, and if what I hear isn't verifiable, I keep it moving. And 8, develop a growth mindset by embracing challenges, feedback, and the idea that abilities can be developed. This keeps you open to learning and less likely to fall into the Dunning-Kruger trap. These sayings and mindsets are like mental speed bumps that encourage us to pause, reflect, and keep learning. Perfect counters to the Dunning-Kruger effect. So why discuss the Dunning-Kruger effect? I wanted to highlight this among other biases to give it a name and understand how we operate through it and what we can do about it. And I'm wondering about the anxiety associated with knowledge and awareness and whether that impacts an individual's drive to move forward. And I found that the answer is yes. This anxiety can show up in a few different ways. Through the fear of the unknown. This is where learning new things means stepping into unfamiliar territory and can trigger uncertainty and discomfort. Or through the fear of failure, where we're worrying about making mistakes or not getting it right, and this can cause stress or even avoidance. Or, as we mentioned earlier, imposter syndrome. As you grow, you might feel like a fraud or doubt your own abilities, even when you're actually improving. As well as performance anxiety. This is the pressure to succeed or improve quickly, and this can make you feel overwhelmed. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as learning anxiety or growth anxiety. Take a moment to think about this. There are terms regarding our anxiety around learning and growth. Anxiety, as defined by psychologists like Fromm and May, is what an organism or person experiences when there is a threat to being. Learning and growth tends to shift what we think we know and may alienate us from our friends, family, and close circles. The potential separation from others can send chills down many spines, and many may feel that it's more beneficial to appease instead of following their internal voice. This can happen for a few reasons, such as change being uncomfortable. See, our brains are wired to prefer the familiar. Change, even positive change, can feel threatening. This also speaks to why there are courses on change management for organizations. Effort is to aid individuals in managing change. The tug of war between comfort and growth is evidenced here. Or ego and identity. And this is where learning new things can challenge our sense of self, especially if it means admitting we don't know something. What I appreciate about others I've worked with over the years is, especially when a manager told me, if you don't know, say you don't know. That way we spend less time talking as though we're on the same page, when in reality, there's information asymmetry. If you say up front, I don't know, don't feel bad about it. Look at it as an opportunity to learn, research to fortify what you learn, practice what you learn, and eventually realize you know more than you did before. Like we say in bodybuilding coaching, trust the process. Or through social pressure. You see, we may worry about how others perceive our learning curve or mistakes. I'll tell you, I wrestled with this for years, even learning to listen and ask questions when invited into discussions on topics I was ignorant of. I had to remind myself, either you can look and sound silly and learn, or you can look like you understand and inwardly reeling in discomfort, hoping no question is sent your way. So, what are some ways in which we can overcome this anxiety and strive for better awareness and knowledge? 1. You can normalize the discomfort. Here, we remind ourselves that anxiety is a natural part of growth. Everyone feels it, especially when stepping outside their comfort zone. 2. Break tasks into small steps. Set achievable bite-sized goals so progress feels manageable and less overwhelming. Remember, you eat the family-sized deep dish pizza one slice at a time. 3. Seek support and feedback. Connect with mentors, peers, or communities who can encourage you and provide constructive feedback. 4. Reframe mistakes as data. See mistakes as information, not as reflections of your worth or ability. 5. Mindfulness and stress reduction. Practices like meditation, deep breathing, or journaling can help manage anxiety and keep you grounded. And of course, 6. Practice self-compassion. Treat yourself with kindness when you make mistakes. Remember, errors are part of the learning process. Once you have awareness and knowledge, here's how to manage learning anxiety and apply what you've learned. 1. Reflect regularly. Journaling or quiet reflection helps you notice how anxiety shows up for you and how you've managed it in the past. 2. Identify triggers. Pay attention to situations, thoughts, or feelings that spark anxiety around learning or change. 3. Develop coping strategies. Create a toolkit. Deep breathing, positive self-talk, reaching out for help to use when anxiety arises. 4. Celebrate progress. Acknowledge growth, no matter how small. This builds confidence and motivation. And 5. Stay curious. Keep the focus on curiosity and growth, not perfection. This reduces pressure and keeps learning enjoyable. So in summary, yes, learning and improving can absolutely bring up anxiety, but that's a sign you're stretching yourself. By normalizing discomfort, breaking things down, seeking support, and practicing self-awareness, you can not only manage the anxiety, but use it as fuel for even greater growth. Okay, if you feel a little beat up, remember Ho'oponopono, a traditional Hawaiian practice of reconciliation and forgiveness, pairs beautifully with the process of dismantling Dunning-Kruger biases, even though they come from very different traditions. Here's how Ho'oponopono can be used when someone is working to recognize and overcome their Dunning-Kruger tendencies. 1. Radical self-honesty. Ho'oponopono begins with acknowledging personal responsibility for one's thoughts and actions. This mirrors the first step in overcoming Dunning-Kruger, honestly admitting you might not know as much as you think. The phrase, "I'm sorry," is a direct invitation to humility. 2. Seeking forgiveness for blind spots. Saying, "Please forgive me," in Ho'oponopono is about recognizing the harm, even unintentional, your ignorance or overconfidence may have caused, whether to yourself, your work, or others. It's a compassionate way of confronting your own biases. 3. Expressing gratitude for growth. The thank you step acknowledges the learning that comes from recognizing your limitations. It's about appreciating the opportunity to grow, even if it's uncomfortable. And 4. Offering love to yourself and others. "I love you" in Ho'oponopono isn't just self-directed. It extends compassion to anyone affected by your misjudgments. This step is about healing relationships and fostering a growth mindset, which is the antidote to Dunning-Kruger. Imagine you're reflecting on a project where you were overly confident in some key details. Using Ho'oponopono, you might say to yourself, "I'm sorry for not recognizing my knowledge gaps. Please forgive me for any mistakes or misunderstandings that resulted. Thank you for the chance to learn and improve. And I love you." Directed inward to nurture self-compassion and outward to anyone impacted. In short, Ho'oponopono provides a gentle, mindful framework for self-reflection, humility, and repair, making it a powerful tool for anyone wanting to move beyond the Dunning-Kruger effect and embrace lifelong growth. Here's a quote from psychologist Eric Fromm. "We have the know-how, but not the know why or know what for." I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever thought you aced something only to realize you missed the mark? Or realized you were doubting yourself for no reason? Send me your stories or thoughts, or leave a comment wherever you're listening. Biases are part of being human. The trick isn't to eliminate them, but to recognize them and get curious. That's where real growth starts. Thanks for listening. If you found value in today's episode, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you never miss the latest. Share this episode with someone who could use a little inspiration. Your experiences help us all move forward together. Check out the previous episodes on each of the personality traits for more expanded deep dives. Thank you for joining me on this topic of biases, particularly the Dunning-Kruger bias. If you've learned something new about yourself, I'd love to hear from you. Remember, your personality is your superpower. Use it with awareness, kindness, and curiosity. Until next time, keep questioning, keep growing, and keep showing up for yourself. Take care, and join me next time where we'll pick and dig in on brain boogers.